managing your attention is what you say yes to. And so I just started saying no way more. No is my favorite word now.
Oh, welcome to the She Speaks podcast, a podcast created to elevate women's voices across diverse backgrounds on topics impacting women. I'm your host, Aliza Freud, founder and CEO of SheSpeaks. Each week, I have a conversation with a woman expert who shares her best how-to advice on a topic so we can learn how to better do that one thing from a woman who's been there and done that. Our hope is that these conversations help you feel more inspired to speak up and be heard in your own life and work. Now, on to the episode. Welcome back to the show. Hope you all had a wonderful 4th of July week. We did not have an episode last week. We were off for 4th of July, but we are back this week with a terrific episode and one that really was relevant for me. I have always been somebody who has more things that I want to get done than I seem to have time. And I have always thought about what is the best way to manage my time? How do I use time wisely? And so I'm excited to share with you this conversation I had with Dr. Dawna Ballard. Dr. Ballard is a professor and she's a PhD at University of California at Santa Barbara. And she's an expert on something called chronemics, which I did not know what that was, but it's the study of time and specifically how that is bound to human communication. And so what Dr. Ballard, who is working on finishing up a book called Time by Design, which is coming out soon, what we talk about is how we all think about our time. And Mark Cuban, for example, I've heard him, he is a very successful entrepreneur, and I've heard him talk about the one thing that doesn't matter how much money you have is that we all have the same amount of time in a given day, and we all have the same amount of time to get things done. And so using our time wisely is really what differentiates us in terms of being able to succeed with what we want to do. So I am excited to have you hear this conversation with Dr. Ballard because what she talks about is how we can manage our time better, how to think about our time, which I don't think I've often done. I don't really think about my time. I just think, oh, these are all the things I have to get done. But Dr. Ballard really gives us some really smart things to think about in terms of how do we think about our time? How do we think about managing our time and really focusing on what are the things that we want to get done? So I'm going to let you hear this great conversation. With that, we're going to jump right into it. Here we go. Dr. Dawna Ballard, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so looking forward to this conversation. As someone who has spent many years working, being a parent, being out in the world in life, I have struggled with this idea of trying to balance all the things and have felt very much I'm losing the battle. So I would love if you could first talk a little bit about how you got interested in this field of expertise.
Oh, great. It started very young. I started as an undergraduate. I read a cultural anthropologist, Edward Hall. I read a part of his book called The Dance of Life. And he was just talking about the fact that there's more than one way to orient to time, that time wasn't this one thing that I thought, having only lived in the United States, I thought there was just this one truth about time. And so I, like you, was always racing around. And I mean, literally racing around. I'm like a super fast walker. And a friend I went to undergrad at Howard University, and famously on the yard, people between classes would hang out and he would see me and he would start mimicking by just walking really fast, because most of the time when you saw me, that's what I was doing. Cause I was like almost a 4.0, 3.96 GPA and an intern on the Hill and all of these things. And I just figured you just have to move fast to get it all done. I had never questioned that belief because that's the culture that we live in. And so when I read that all cultures actually don't live this way and they don't believe that about time, I just was so excited and oh my goodness. And at the time, I was interested in work. I was a communication major. And I thought, oh, and this matters for work too, because building relationships really happens when you let go of time, right? Like our best customer service experiences are when people aren't thinking about time and they're just wanting to solve the problem, which is what we would call event time versus clock time. And I thought, we need to leverage this. This shouldn't just be something in other cultures. And that was my initial thing was I'm going to study it for this very practical thing of like how to improve organizational communication. And through that process, I realized, oh, I could just improve my life too. So one simple example is one thing that I do with my undergrads. It's time is so interrelated. The way we feel about it and what we do are directly related, right? Like we believe it's scarce. And so we then do all of these things in this way and move very fast. And so one simple thing is resting. I thought I just have to move more and move faster. And then when I realized if it's not true, like if God did not give us time that is this, if that's just a cultural belief, then it means that I can decide that I actually want to consider that time is more than just a way to get things done. And that's actually a place to care for myself and to care for others. So, a simple thing is getting enough sleep at night. And I have my undergrads for a whole week attempt to get whatever their body needs, 8 to 10 hours, and to get that for a whole week. Yeah, it's an assignment. And we look at all the research on how sleep deprivation actually makes you dumber. It lowers your immune system. It's linked to dementia. There's so many problems with it. And we look at all that and I say, okay, so if we're going to, for a minute, suspend our belief about time and just look at the data, then let's get a full night's sleep for a whole week and see how it changes. And they are just like, my goodness, I worked faster and better by actually slowing down and sleeping. And so then we just discovered that simple thing makes your life better. Like it's so much better. It's like
Mhm.
that alone. So
Yeah.
that's a simple example that anyone can do. And if they can't, I ask them to write about if you decided not to get enough sleep, why? And so then
Yeah.
they can look at, oh, I had this other thing and I had these projects. And then it allows us to say, maybe I have taken on too much. Maybe I need to do less. Maybe I'm in too many extracurriculars because at the end of the day, I like to take the long game. I like to look at over long time scales what works because I totally trashed my body as a young person because I didn't know this. It wasn't like the
Mhm.
minute I read Paul's work, I was like, oh, it changed my life. No, it's taken 30 years. I'm still applying it and figuring it out because, again,
Mhm.
I was born and raised in this culture.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm I am so appreciative that this is something you're talking to students about because I know and I remember being a student myself in undergrad and you just think, "Oh, I'll pull an all-nighter to study for this thing."
Yeah.
And you think, "Oh, that's a good approach. That's a smart approach." Maybe
Yeah.
not so much.
Absolutely. And mathematically, it makes sense, but biologically, it doesn't. And in
Yeah.
fact, one of my favorite, my students give me these cards about each lecture, things that they thought of called New Designs for Time. And one said, I had a million assignments and finals this week. And so, you know what I did, Dr. Ballard? I got more sleep. And she was like, and I was able to do it all better.
Yep.
So,
So you've said that we cannot manage our time, but we can manage our attention.
yes.
And I love that. It it probably would not have meant as much to me in my days of running around like trying to do everything all the time all at once,
Right.
but it now resonates so much with me. What do you mean by we cannot manage our time, but what we can manage our attention?
What I mean by we cannot manage our time is that if you think about what time is, it's literally everything that happens in the world and in our lives. So the last time I tried to control everything that happened in the world and in my life, I was very frustrated. And I do try occasionally and I fail, right? So we all know we cannot control emergencies. We cannot control tech glitches. We can plan, but life is going to happen. And so if your goal with time management is, I'm going to just control all of the things, and then I'll be able to show up, right, as my best self. That's the idea. You won't be able to. And so what you're going to be constantly doing is making up for the fact that things didn't go as you planned. And so weather we can't control, right? So many things. Like we had a week canceled this year in the semester because of a ice storm. I can't control that. And we've had the whole world experience a global pandemic where we literally could not control anything. And so all of our time was completely thrown out the door. We got to see that we don't manage time. And managing your attention means a lot of different things. It means it's like multi-layered. It means that how many things have I put on my plate and which of those things matter most. And it does become partly a reprioritization. Like it becomes coming to terms with our immortality, right? The idea that, okay, if I don't get enough sleep, if I don't take care of me, I'm not a robot. So I actually can't do all of these things. And so part of it becomes a boundary issue. Managing your attention is what you say yes to. And so I just started saying no way more. I would get up and just practice saying no. And I would play songs with no in them. There's a lot of funny songs about just saying no. And so that's part of it. Like, where does my attention go? Another part of it, actually, meditation is another part of attention management. There's research that by David Levy out of the University of Washington. He trained people in meditation, and then he had a control group that did nothing. And then he had another that just like he trained in relaxation to see, is it just that? It's not that. The only group that was better at multitasking, and by that it means various stimuli were coming at them and they needed to know when to respond and how to respond. Those that meditated knew when to not respond and when to respond. They were the best multitaskers because they had much more groundedness in this, what I call a center. And so that's the other thing about meditation, is it just calms down your nervous system, right? And it trains your brain to be in charge and not to follow every stimuli, right? The little puppy, right? That everything that you see, no, I don't have to follow everything I see. I'm at the center of this, and it puts you back in that driver's seat, if you will. So those are two of the best ways, I think, to manage attention. And then the thing that tends to undo it, that we need to come to terms with, is technology, is social media, is the notifications, the pings. That's another big part, is turning off, like the do not disturb on your phone, the turning off the sound so that you get to be in charge of your attention. And that's really what it's been called like an attention economy, because that's how people monetize. There's not really a lot of the land, like we've colonized a lot of things. And the remaining thing, I heard Bo Burnham say this, that the last thing that we haven't colonized that we're looking to is our attention, because that's where the money is now. And so if you don't turn those things off, if you don't delete them, I go through a practice of just deleting apps off of my phone and putting Kindle or Audible on the front page so that when I go to press that, it's not there. And to put the time limits, right, on like, so I do want to check in on friends. So maybe 5 minutes seems reasonable. Like I figure whoever I see in that one scroll, I've checked in. And if not, we'll have to catch up. We must not be that close, right? Because your closest friends you already keep up with. So it's letting go of this FOMO that I have to know everything all the time, not reading all of the news feeds, the scrolls, all of that.
You know what resonates so much with me when you talk about this idea that, about time management and how it's not kind of really a real thing. It's because obviously outside forces come in and mess what you thought you were going to do. It's just out of our control. But what is within our control is what we feed ourselves to think about. And that, I feel like that in a way could be the emotion that you're talking about, because I used to think of it as share of mind. What am I spending my time
Ooh,
thinking
I
about?
like that. Share of mind.
Yeah,
Yes.
I don't know why. I just think of it like, okay,
That.
I have this much capacity, and it's I do like what you say about emotional, because it is goes back a lot to your emotion. What am I going to spend my emotional energy on?
Right.
And this idea that we should be giving our minds that guidance. And
Yeah.
I think that that was like a big aha moment for me later in life. I
Absolutely.
didn't get that. I didn't get that I could give myself that guidance. I just thought I had to react to whatever was coming at me. And it's unbelievable what it does and how life changing it can be to
Absolutely.
take control of that. And as you said, to manage your emotion, because we decide how we're going to react to something. We can't change anybody else. We can only change how we react to it, or what we spend our time thinking about and doing. So I just, that's why when I read that you talk about not being able to manage time, but you can manage your emotion.
You are right on. That is it. That is right on target. And when you said you weren't taught that early in life, yeah, and I think particularly I think women aren't taught that because I think it's a boundary issue. So that we're like, who needs us?
Mhm,
You need me? Okay. And it wasn't until I could not do, like,
mhm,
again, this has been a journey for me. I always say, I tell my students, hey, people study either what they're really good at or what they're really bad at. And in this case, I study what I'm really struggling with, right? Like these are
mhm,
the things that have haunted me. And I do believe that the younger kids, I have the Gen Z population in my classes right now, and those women are getting it earlier, and the men, both and all genders, are getting it earlier. All people are getting it earlier. But I do think that for people who identify as women, it can happen later in life because you start off your life trying to please everyone and
mhm.
doing whatever is asked of you. And then at a certain point, I realized that didn't work and that I wasn't happy. I was like, if I try to make everyone else happy, I can't. And the only person I can guarantee will not be happy is me. So I'm doing nothing. I'm not succeeding in any way. Like, I think
Mhm.
maybe I would have sacrificed if I thought, okay, in this sick way, everyone else is happy and I'm not. No, no one's happy. No one's
Yeah,
happy, but
yeah,
especially me. And so
yeah,
and people don't like you to say no, but that's a big part of attention management is just not having it on your calendar to begin with.
yeah.
That is it.
Yeah, and I do think that until it becomes a habit, to your point, it has to be something that you put on the calendar. It has to be something that you train yourself to
You do.
do.
You do.
But just as we can train ourselves to do something that doesn't serve us, we can train
Right.
ourselves to do something that does serve us.
We can. And it'll become addictive. No is my favorite word now.
Oh,
It's so
oh,
easy. It was very uncomfortable. And some no's are harder than other no's,
yeah.
but all no's used to be hard. And now
Yes.
it just feels like it's the default.
Oh my God, I love that. If someone is hearing this and they're thinking to themselves, how do I get better at saying no? What would you recommend?
A friend. So I don't know if I should do something. And usually if you don't know if you should, it's probably because you shouldn't. But I would be asked sometimes a big request, right? And I would table it and just ask a friend. And then she and I are the same people. We would ask each other, I've been invited to do this. I already have this and this on that week. I'm worried I won't be able to do it. What do you think? And so tabling and having this body double that comes in and is there with you to right to hold that
Yes.
is huge. That helped me because it wasn't just me anymore. It wasn't like, what's wrong with me? It's no, you're right. And then that your friend can look at the math of it and can say, and in this case, it's a friend of mine who also is a mother, and we can just look at the math of it, and we know just how unpredictable our lives can be anyway. And we're all at a certain age where I don't have as much bandwidth to just do as I might have. But even in your 20s, I think I wish I had just figured it out in my 20s, because I would have more bandwidth now if I hadn't used up so much of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself that I think too that you get to a certain point in your life where you say that you need to shift your focus almost from, for me, I spent so many years focusing on achieving, right? We go to school and you're supposed to achieve good grades and then achieve the next thing, you're the next level of education if you're going to get more education, but whatever it is you're achieving. And I think then you get to a certain point and you think, I'm missing so much. Like I don't have time to do all these other things I want to do. So much is like coming, like that analogy of drinking out of a fire hose that someone just goes past you,
Right.
that you get to
Absolutely.
a point where you recognize the value is not necessarily in the achievement, but it's about the taking the time to really soak in what is happening and that journey.
Absolutely. And to spend time with the people that you love and doing the things that you love.
Mhm.
And we model, as parents, we model for our kids. And so it's also not modeling
Yes.
overwhelm. Why do we don't want
Yes.
to pass that on?
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes, and that was a big wake-up call for me too,
Yeah.
when I realized that my kids were picking up,
Yeah.
it's not about what you say because kids are smart. It's about what they watch, and it's not about what you're saying to them, it's about what they're seeing you do.
That's it.
And if you don't want a kid that's gonna be someone that goes out into the world and is
Yeah.
anxious and, "Oh my god, I gotta get all this stuff done," and not doesn't, take the time to
Right.
be able to enjoy things and enjoy the experience, you realize really quickly what you're doing.
Absolutely. They are little, like, kind of photocopies, and you could look if you wanna know what you're doing, kinda look and see what are they
Mm,
doing around achievement, and you'll know. Yeah, it's a hugely important thing to get a hold of for that
yeah.
reason, because I see these kids. They're in my
Mm,
classes,
mm,
and the mental illness has risen in youth. It's a big
mm,
deal, and,
mm.
we owe them better. We owe ourselves better, right?
Yeah. You talk about the fact that you say that work-life balance is not possible, that it's just not a thing that we can do. What should we try to do instead?
Okay. The reason that I say that is people say, "Well, shouldn't I be trying to have a mixture and like overall well being?" You absolutely should. You can strive for well being, but what work life balance is not well being. Work life balance, that was something that, frankly, capitalists told us to achieve
Mhm.
only to keep our lives outside of our work. So that's really problematic. That was the whole point. It was to get farmers socialized into this new way of being, because in agrarian work, the family, yourself, your body, everything just it's all at once, and you're attending to, right, you're having the siesta, you're getting up early, but you're with your kids. All of these relational things are happening, and to get farmers good at being factory workers, that's when they said, "Hey, your life, that's outside, and here you just work." So this is
Wow.
why, yeah. So this is why I say this, its very inception was never based upon well-being. So let's just forget this like balancing thing. Let's stop
Yeah.
that. And the reason that I use the word alignment is it's something that bodies do. And I learned this when I was injured and had a physical therapist. And I learned that part of the reason I got injured running was because of poor alignment. My hips was all like there was all of these things. And so everything's related, is what I figured
Mhm.
out. My knee, it's not a knee issue, it's an overall system issue. So the
Yeah.
reason that I think alignment works is it's about looking at the multiple systems and not pitting one against each other as here's work and here's life, because
Mhm.
that's weird. But look
Yeah.
at all of the things that matter to you. And so like when I do a workshop, I'm like, I give people like a dozen different potential categories and say, hey, which of these matter to you? And there's
Mhm.
multiple. And to check in, alignment is, am I giving attention to each of these in the time and space that's needed? Is it just an
Yeah.
annual thing where I just need to do this once a year? Or is it daily something that I need to, let's say a mammogram, let's say I need to do that once a year. So am I doing that? So that's part of taking care of yourself. But on a daily basis, do I have a practice that's sustainable? Are my relationships sustainable? Are my kids doing well? Are right my own health,
Mhm.
my long-term career goals, not just my short-term. And so if you look at that, it's more like our bodies in that
Yeah.
each part's not the same and they don't need the same attention, but they all need attention at some
Mhm.
level because they all work together.
Yeah. I love that. I love that analogy so much because it's also the idea of taking a step back to really see the bigger picture. And I think that this is something we can get so caught up in is like what's happening right in front of us. Like right now, what's happening right in front of us and then judging the whole thing, the whole picture based on one small thing that's going on in front of us now. And it's being able to take that step back, and maybe this is why you talked about meditation earlier, but it's being able to take that step back and say, let me look at the bigger picture here to really understand the totality of what's happening. And that is such an interesting way to think about alignment. And I'm wondering if you can share maybe some tangible tips for how we can get better aligned if we're not aligned.
Okay. So I recommend keeping a list of all of those things. So I have a place in my planner where all the things that matter, right? I make a list of what all of those things are that need to be done. And instead of just doing my daily list, I go to that and import some of those little by little so that I'm just not for I was terrible at foregoing any kind of health maintenance, like just those annual checkups.
Yep.
I'm like, I don't have time for that. The dental, all of the stuff that keeps you going with the taking time off, like setting time in your schedule. I used to not really take vacations. They were always working vacations. Like I would travel, but it was for a conference. But when I realized, oh, I have to book this on my schedule. I don't wait until I'm done with everything because that will never happen. You
Yeah.
have to just create that time in advance. Those are like two really simple ways
Mhm.
to address alignment so that you're daily kind of having to pay attention to, have I ignored a particular part of my life? And
Yeah.
if so, let me not just use my email as my to-do list, which is what a lot of us do. It's very easy, right? It's a
Mhm.
kind of made for you to-do list of people that need you. But where do I need me? Where does my family and my loved ones, where do they need me? And you little by little can go through those things and just keep seeing, have I done the wellness work that I need to do in addition to the financial work?
Yeah. In terms of then the approach, it really is a lot about just being purposeful
It,
about how you're spending your time and understanding that it's all of what you do all paints a bigger picture about who you are and how you're going to feel.
It does. It's like we're the things we do repetitively. And so a daily practice is also a big part of that alignment is I check
Mm.
in. So another example would be like I start my day and this only takes about 15 minutes. It's not a huge commitment, but it's starting that day with you at the center of the day and the things that matter to you. And so I do a little tiny bit of gratitude journaling. Like I maybe make 5 to 10 things that easily come off the top of my head. That already reminds me of the totality of what matters, right?
Mhm.
Ready. Because usually my family's somewhere on there, my health
Right.
is on there, the
Right.
just the joy. Often I'll just say it's the sun's out today. If it's
Mhm.
winter time and there's a day of sun, the sun's out. Like it reminds me of that. And so I
Mhm.
become the center of my own story again, as opposed to all the other people. And then I do usually some meditation, and that can be longer, but I always have it minimum, right? So I can get a little bit like a 10-minute meditation. And then I set an intention for the day. My intention for that one day, what
Mm.
is it? What do I want? And it's not just about task, but it's also how I'm moving in the world. And then I have this morning meeting, which is a totally starkly different approach. But this gentleman, David Goggins, who's into getting things done, he's very intense, an ex-Navy SEAL, way more intense than I want to be around fitness for sure. But he has this idea that imagine all of the things, and it sounds negative, but it's imagine all the things that could go wrong, plan for them now. And so for me, that ends up being things like am I likely to have put too much on my list today? But I envision that, and then I solve that problem right then, and I plan for it. And yeah, and that's like my way of keeping all of the pieces. And I don't always do it. Another part of alignment and why I use this metaphor is balance is such an all or none, right? Because there's two things. It's very binary. You
Yes.
are failing or succeeding.
Mm.
The other thing is with alignment, we don't have to, our bodies are designed to be out of alignment sometimes. Like it's not ideal, but if you do the day-to-day work and you're strong, you might do too much in one window and get a little sprain, but you can recover from that.
Yep.
And so there's times where it just all falls apart. And I realized, oh, it's because I've forgotten my daily practice. That really, really helps me a lot. But you'd be amazed at how big the gratitude is in terms of keeping those things that matter right at the center.
Oh, yes. I have really learned to value having a gratitude practice and being as specific as you can be in the things you're grateful for.
Yeah.
Because we don't like it's too out there to just say, oh, I'm thankful for my family.
Right.
I tend to like what I do is I'll say, I am thankful that my daughter came and proactively talked to me about this thing the other day.
Yes.
Like that I feel like that's so much more valuable for me as a person to be specific, not to just say, oh, I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for my job or whatever. It really has to be specific.
Thank you. And it makes it so much easier to do it because you remember it's not some abstract idea. Like you remember that thing that made you smile. Yeah, absolutely. And it fires you up for the day.
Yes, totally. You are working on a book, which is going to be Time by Design, which is going to be put out by MIT Press. So congratulations.
Thank
So
you.
exciting.
Thank you.
If people want to learn more about you, find out when the book is coming out. What is the best way for them to do that?
Wow. I do have a website. It's DawnaBallard.com. I have an Instagram account. I teach time.
Yeah.
So you could follow me there. But I don't try to avoid social media. I try to do it really intentionally. So it might be months between my posts. So I'd say the website, DawnaBallard.com, is probably the easiest way.
Awesome. Dr. Dawna Ballard, thank you so much for spending this time with me today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed talking to you, and I just appreciate just this conversation being out in the world.
Thank you for listening. If you're an influencer or a brand that wants to work with us, please feel free to email us at info@shespeaks.com. Until next time.